for all the prayers that went up for our family. I thank God for the attorneys. I just thank God for everything that He has done. My soul is rejoicing right now.
That is the mother of Walter Scott speaking after her son's killer, former officer Michael Slager, was sentenced to 20 years in prison as a result of that shooting that took place in 2015. Scott, who was not armed, was running away from Slager. Then the incident was caught on camera and sparked national outrage. Slager's state murder trial ended in a hung jury in 2016. In May of this year, he pleaded guilty to violating Scott's civil rights. Those were federal civil rights charges. Now, Slager had faced up to life in prison, but over the last 4 days at a sentencing hearing, he was able to mount, in essence, a defense. It laid out that there were other options involved, and also they claimed that other cops were involved in the high-profile case that they have escaped punishment.
They did a wonderful job. The Scott family is pleased. I want the world to know that the Scott family is pleased. We got justice.
Again, Michael Slager, the former police officer who shot and killed Walter Scott, sentenced to 20 years in federal prison after he pled guilty to federal civil rights violations. Let's go to our panel. Michael Brown, Democratic strategist, former vice chair of the DNC Finance Committee. Tiffany Cross, managing editor, curator, and publisher of The Beat. Robert Patillo, attorney and host of CBS Radio Atlanta. No, it's a shock to be even having a conversation that a cop is going to prison for killing an unarmed black man.
Well, I think also we have to look at what went on in the case at the state level. Why did the state not retry him for murder? If there's a case where someone is shot in the back on camera, evidence is planted, the cop is lying clearly, and we still can't get a murder conviction, it brings into question what exactly we'll have to do in the future to get murder convictions.
Well, so here's the deal. There's a hung jury. The federal folks, so what happened there was you had two charges that were on the table. You had the state charge, then you had the federal charges. So what happened was it was Slager's attorneys who realized he could be convicted of murder in state court. They chose to then plead guilty in federal court, knowing full well he could spend life in prison. Remember, it was a murder charge he was facing. Now, the state can still prosecute Michael. Exactly. They can still prosecute Slager. So even though he has gotten 20 years in federal prison, they could still go back and retry him in the state courts.
Well, first, I'm happy for the Scott family. That's first of all, and obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to their family for their loss. Does anybody know what the tally is on how many convictions have actually happened on these kind of situations?
About two.
About two.
Right, right.
And so,
I mean, literally about two. I mean, you had the police officer in New York, the Asian police officer, and of course, a lot of Asian activists were ticked off. He was convicted, but they gave him pretty much house arrest and community service. Of course, the woman in Tulsa, she got off. I'm trying to think as we go along. Daniel Holtzclaw, who was convicted of raping several black women, he went to prison. But in terms of any of these shootings, I can only, top of my head, I can only think of two.
And this particular former officer had to plead guilty to get his conviction.
To federal civil rights violation.
Right, and it wasn't even a jury that convicted him.
Right.
So clearly we still have a long way to go, as you just mentioned.
Tiffany?
Well, I think the scary thing about this is, you know, in the mainstream media, they chase the shiny object. So we're talking about this today, but right now that Donald Trump is in office and, you know, the news cycle is a ridiculous, endless stream of what's coming out of this administration, how many more Walter Scotts are out there that we're not hearing about? And I would also think at this point we should applaud Senator Tim Scott, who was a champion and spoke out on this, which shows this is not a political issue, it's not a bipartisan, or it is a bipartisan issue, and this is something that Republicans should be all over, who purport to, you know, claim, you know, they support little government or small government. So yeah, my biggest concern is how many of these cases that we're not hearing about, and people who are losing their lives today, but they don't get the mainstream media's attention.
Well, first of all, I don't even know how many of these mainstream morning shows even covering this particular story. We also, of course, have some videos been released, a case out of L.A. where a black man was shot 17 times. They claim he was pointing a gun at officers. The video comes out, he wasn't pointing a gun as well. Sean King King, of course, also has another story, just stunning, where you see the officer literally tracking this guy down, and that's what we see. And so at the end of the day, Michael, you're right. You have to have, the question is, will juries actually convict? Because remember, and also these police officers are purposely choosing trials by judge as well. We saw the police officer who shot, of course, who jumped on top of the car in Cleveland and fired the shots into the car. That judge released him. He was found not guilty. You get the police officer in St. Louis, trial by judge, found not guilty, and then you had clear video where he was planting the gun in the car as well. The officers in Baltimore purposely chose trial by judge, and so they understand that even these judges are even more narrow in terms of how they view the law, and they're able to get off. Robert?
I think this highlights something I think I've mentioned before for new civil rights legislation. Police departments, police officers have had 50 years to adapt to the old civil rights laws. That's why it's so hard to get convictions or even prosecutions at the federal level. You saw when the Justice Department under President Obama, under both Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, investigated shootings, often they weren't able to bring charges because the laws are antiquated. That should be the next push that we do, the push for new criminal justice, new civil rights laws.
As long as you get Republicans control the House and the Senate and Trump in the White House, that ain't gonna happen.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.